At a college reunion party, someone suggested playing a game of Who Knows Who Best. I drew my ex-boyfriend, Carter Evans. I looked at the 21 questions on the slip of paper and answered them one by one. His favorite food, his favorite music, his favorite color, the age of his first sexual encounter. Then, someone in the crowd started teasing. Sera, how do you know Carter so well? Don't tell me you even know his cock size. I kept my face completely expressionless and said,
8.
5 inches. The room instantly erupted. Seriously? Carter is that blessed? Let me see. Wait, didn't Sera and Carter date before? But isn't the girl Carter likes Mia Hayes? Carter took a sip of his beer, his voice completely flat. Stop talking nonsense, guys. Sera and I are just childhood neighbors. We grew up together, so she just knows me well. I smiled and chimed in. Yeah, we're just neighbors. Turns out, time really does heal all wounds. When I said those words, I realized I truly did view him as nothing more than a next-door neighbor. Halfway through the party, the gossip didn't stop. Someone smiled and asked, Sera, you've been in London for the past 2 years, so you probably don't know yet. Carter and Mia are officially dating now. Another girl chimed in. Oh yeah, they're so clingy. I literally saw Mia feeding Carter ice cream on campus. Mia sat right next to Carter, her cheeks flushing a light pink. Stop teasing us, guys. Despite her words, she leaned her head onto Carter's shoulder. The other girl laughed. No normal friends are that intimate. They're definitely friends with benefits. Carter didn't deny it. Instead, his hand gently tightened around Mia's waist. I lowered my eyes, my heart as still as dead water. 2 years ago, I would have stayed up all night crying just because they had lunch together. I would have scrolled through my Snapchat chat history with Carter over and over, desperately trying to figure out why he picked her up in person, why he protected her in front of everyone, yet refused to ever admit I was his girlfriend. Now, looking back, it all felt so pathetic. Mia suddenly stood up, holding a glass of wine, and walked over to me. Sera, about the research fellowship back then. I really didn't mean to steal your spot. I stared at the silver ring on her ring finger, and my mind suddenly flashed back to the summer after we took our SATs. Carter had taken me to a silver workshop. He spent hours hunching over the table, his knuckles rubbed raw. I asked him what he was making. He said they were promise rings. Who wants to wear a promise ring with you? Fine, suit yourself. Even though he said that, once he finished, he grabbed my hand and slid one of the rings onto my finger. It was a perfect fit. That was the first time he had ever actively held my hand, and the first time he admitted we were together. Later, during our very last fight, I ripped the ring off and threw it at him. I thought he would throw it away, or at least keep it hidden. I never expected him to hand it over to Mia. The people around us started chanting.
Drink up, Sera.
Mia is offering you a toast. Don't be so rude. I picked up my glass of juice and lightly clinked it against hers. I don't drink. The smile on Mia's face faded slightly. Sera is still the same as always. She lowered her eyes and added, always such a buzzkill. Someone immediately burst out laughing. Right after, a shot glass was slammed heavily in front of me. Here, let's toast to the ultimate simp. The guy had a booming voice. Simping for 5 years, only to end up with absolutely nothing, and even ended up serving his golden girl on a silver platter. Sera Miller, you really were a dedicated doormat from start to finish. The next second, Carter raised his glass and clinked it with the guys. Well said. The glasses clinked with a crisp, mocking sound. Watching that scene, I suddenly remembered our last fight before I left. I had asked him, Carter, I just want you to acknowledge me in front of everyone. Is that really too much to ask? He replied, it's pointless. Looking back now, those answers I cried over and constantly obsessed about were indeed completely pointless. I just didn't get it back then. I had to hit rock bottom before I was willing to turn back. As the party wrapped up, it was pouring rain outside. Carter stood at the bottom of the steps. I'll drive you back to your dorm. No thanks.
Sera.
His voice turned heavy. You ran away to Europe for 2 years out of spite. What are you still running from? Are you afraid you can't keep up the act anymore? I remained expressionless and raised my hand to hail an Uber. The window slowly rolled up, blocking his familiar face behind the sheet of rain. He didn't chase after me.
Just like all those years in the past.
He would only stand there, waiting for me to crawl back on my own. But this time, I wouldn't. At 11 that night, a sudden bout of acute gastroenteritis hit me like a truck. I gritted my teeth and drove myself to the ER. As the nurse inserted the 4 needle into the back of my hand, I instinctively closed my eyes. In my days, I felt like I was back in the high school clinic at 17. A hand had covered my eyes back then. If you don't look, it won't hurt. I opened my eyes, and to my shock, I actually saw Carter. He was standing not far away, his expression tense. I instinctively called out his name. Carter. The next second, my voice was drowned out.
Carter, I'm fine.
I'm just a little cold. Mia was sitting in a chair nearby, her voice soft and fragile. Carter immediately took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. Put this on first. He leaned down to adjust her collar, his movements natural and practiced. I snapped back to reality. The boy standing there was no longer the 17-year-old Carter, who covered my eyes because he was afraid I'd feel pain. My throat felt incredibly dry and bitter, like a pill I couldn't swallow or spit out. What are you doing here? Carter's gaze swept over to me casually, his brow furrowing. I didn't answer. He looked at my forebag, then at my bloodless, pale face. Are you sick? Or is this another one of your attention-grabbing stunts? I found it hilarious. Why else would I be at the hospital? I was no longer the Sarah Miller who would take ice-cold showers in the dead of winter just to give herself a raging fever, so he would come take care of her. Carter, Mia called out softly from behind him. I'm cold. His eyes lingered on my face for a split second before he turned around. That split second felt like an illusion. As he brushed past me, a faint scent of sandalwood drifted by. 2 years ago, this was my absolute favorite scent. Now, it just felt completely foreign. After Carter helped Mia through her checkup, he walked back over to me. Let me borrow your umbrella. Why should I? He looked up at me, his face tight with impatience. Mia has a cold. She can't get wet. She needs this umbrella more than you do. Carter stared at me for a few seconds, then suddenly snatched the umbrella straight out of my hand. He pulled so hard that a tiny bead of blood welled up where my foreneedle had just been pulled. He opened the umbrella and shielded Mia as they walked into the pouring rain. I watched his retreating back grow smaller and smaller. Always like this. He was always so ruthless. It was the exact same during our last fight. That day, the lab was voting on the prestigious research exchange spot. The final, deciding vote lay in Carter's hands. He voted for Mia. I waited until everyone had left before I finally asked him, why? You know how long I prepared for this. You know my academic records are way better than hers. Carter just laughed. Sera, you're being ridiculous. The decision is mine to make, not yours. I fought back my tears. Either we go public right now or we break up. Choose one. Carter looked at me as if I were a hysterical stranger. If you want to trap yourself in this dramatic relationship loop, that's on you. Don't act like you're some tragic victim. That night, Mia boarded a flight to London, and I received a phone call saying my mother was in critical condition. I dialed Carter's number over and over. 50 calls, all ignored. When it finally went through, Mia's voice answered. She asked softly, Sera, is something wrong? I clutched my phone, my entire body turning ice cold. Over the receiver, I heard the faint rustle of fabric, followed by Carter's low, raspy voice. Who is it? It's Sera. Just hang up. The call went dead. That week, I lost my mother, and I completely lost Carter. The sound of the rain snapped me out of my memories. The moment I walked out of the hospital clinic, I saw Carter holding a newly bought umbrella. Get in the car. You just got in 4. You look like a ghost. Why are you still being so stubborn? I didn't budge. Are you still throwing a tantrum over that research spot? I voted for her because she needed that opportunity more than you did. Her parents passed away when she was a kid. She has to work multiple jobs just to afford tuition. You at least still have your mom. And you have me. I stared at him and asked quietly, so, wanting my boyfriend to stand by my side when it doesn't even violate any ethical rules, is that really so wrong? Carter let out a scoff. You always take emotions way too seriously. And you always treat my emotions like they're worth absolutely nothing. Sera, it's pointless. Those 3 words again. I suddenly didn't want to fight anymore. Give me back the silver bracelet my mom gave you. My mother had gifted it to him when she first found out we were dating. Carter had worn it for years. I used to think it was proof that he accepted me, proof of our relationship. Carter's expression darkened. What? You really want to draw a line between us? I didn't say a word. Carter yanked the bracelet off his wrist. The next second, he hurled it violently at me. Sera, are you ever going to stop? The metal bracelet slammed hard against my collarbone, knocking the breath out of me. Carter turned and stormed off. I knelt in the rain, picking up the scattered pieces of the bracelet one by one. The rain washed over the muddy ground. It felt as though even the very last bit of warmth my mother had left me was being washed away. The next day, I went to the lab. Before going abroad, I had left a logbook in my locker. It was filled with my research data, failed experiment logs, and formulas that Carter had personally corrected for me. When I pushed the door open, Carter was leaning over, watching Mia handle a test tube. The temperature isn't high enough. Try again. Why are you still so clumsy, Mia? His tone was incredibly patient and warm. I walked over to my locker and pulled it open. It was completely empty. Looking for this? Mia picked up the logbook from her desk. Give it back. She flipped through a couple of pages, her tone dripping with innocence. I joined the lab late and was struggling to keep up, so Carter let me use this. My data was covered in messy red ink scribbles, and several pages had been torn right in half. What right do you have to touch my research? I reached out to grab it. Mia took a step back, bumping straight into Carter's chest. Carter held her shoulders, his forehead creased in irritation. You're scaring her. You've already gone to Europe, so you don't even need this anymore. Don't be so petty. I looked at him. You gave my personal property to someone else without even asking for my permission. Carter, do you honestly think that just because Mia wants something, I am obligated to hand it over? My chest felt incredibly tight. He didn't say a word. His silence was my answer. I snatched the logbook from her hands and began tearing the pages out, one by one. During my first 6 months in the lab, I knew absolutely nothing. I used to follow him around like a lost puppy with this very notebook, asking endless questions. He always grumbled about how dumb I was, but he would still take it and correct it from start to finish. But now, keeping it was completely meaningless. Carter's face warped with anger. What the hell are you doing? It's my stuff. I have every right to decide what to do with it. I tore the very last page in half and threw the scraps into the trash can. Mia's eyes immediately welled with tears. Carter, did I do something wrong? This has nothing to do with you, Carter said, his voice turning ice cold as he glared at me. You used to take Plan B 4 times a week without uttering a single complaint. What are you acting so high and mighty for now? I froze, forcing my tears back with sheer willpower, and walked out without looking back. That night, a thread shot straight to the top of the university's anonymous forum. The story of a desperate simp who tried to force herself on a guy for 5 years but remained a side chick. The post didn't name me directly, but it listed my major and year with pinpoint accuracy. The poster wrote with pure malice. This girl has been throwing herself at the guy since high school, even following him to the same college. She actually convinced herself she was his actual girlfriend. The comments section was filled with mockery. 5 years and she couldn't even get him to make it official? Girl needs to find a new guy to simp for. The guy is the real victim here, having to deal with a stalker like her. Soon, Carter's frat bro, Zach, left a comment with a smirking emoji. If you know, you know. Carter didn't reply, but he liked Zach's comment. My fingers turned cold as ice as I stared at the screen. I tracked down the IP address of the account. It was Mia. I posted the screenshots of the IP tracker. The next second, the thread was deleted. I tried posting it again, but it was deleted instantly. I marched straight to Carter with my phone. Did you delete my posts?
Why?
She's preparing for her grad school applications right now. Your posts will ruin her reputation and affect her interviews. Besides, I already made her take down her original post. No one will even remember this in a few days. What about my reputation? What about people gossiping about me, cornering me in the restrooms, and taping hateful notes to my dorm room door? None of that matters to you. Carter's eyes flickered slightly, but his expression quickly hardened back into indifference. No one actually hurt you, Sera. Don't make such a dramatic scene. Carter turned and walked away with Mia, whispering softly to soothe her. Don't worry, I'm here. He had never said those words to me. Not when I was being publicly humiliated, not when I lost my mother, not when I lost my home, and not when I lost him. He had never said it. Standing there, I finally realized something. It wasn't that I had never won. It was that Carter had never once chosen to stand by my side. The day before the graduation gala, Carter and I were assigned as co-hosts. Right before the show started, Carter came backstage to find me. We need to talk. I didn't even look up. I have nothing to say to you. Carter suddenly grabbed my wrist and dragged me into an empty classroom nearby. Carter, what the hell are you doing? The sound of the door locking echoed through the room. I rattled the doorknob violently, but it wouldn't budge. I'll let you out once the gala is over. Mia has wanted to stand on that stage since she was a kid. I promised her I'd make her dream come true. You're already the best host in the department. Missing one show won't kill you. A suffocating tightness gripped my chest. To you, everything that matters to me is just some trivial joke. I pounded my fists against the door. The research fellowship was trivial, going public was trivial, me being cyberbullied and having water poured on me was trivial. He didn't reply. Before he walked away, he only muttered a low sentence. Stop making a scene. His footsteps faded away. I stood alone in the dark classroom as the opening music swelled outside. A few minutes later, Mia's sweet, cheerful voice echoed through the speakers, followed by Carter's deep, warm tone. The crowd erupted into thunderous applause. I slid down against the locked door and let my tears fall in silence. I had spent years waiting for Carter to hold my hand and walk out in front of everyone, waiting for him to say, "This is my girlfriend, Sarah Miller." But all I got was Mia. From beginning to end, everyone knew they were more intimate than any real couple. The gala finally ended, and the door was unlocked. Carter stood outside, holding a bouquet of flowers. His eyes lingered on my swollen, red eyes. "Stop crying." I walked right past him. Carter grabbed my arm, looking as if he wanted to say something, but his phone rang.
Caller ID, Mia.
Without a single second of hesitation, he let go of my arm. "Hey." His face fell instantly. "Don't cry. I'm coming right now." Hanging up, he looked back at me.
She's really upset.
"I've already requested time off. Your mom's birthday is in a few days. I'll go back with you to celebrate, and we can finally go public. Can we please stop fighting now?" My fingers trembled slightly. I had waited 4 long years for those words. I had waited until I wanted absolutely nothing to do with him, and only then did they finally come. But hearing them now just felt incredibly pathetic. "Do you seriously still think I went to Europe just to throw a tantrum?" An irritated look flashed across Carter's face. "What else would it be?" I said quietly. "Forget it. My mom doesn't need you to celebrate her birthday anymore." He was finally pushed over the edge, his voice rising sharply. "You were the one who chose to go abroad. You were the one who disappeared and pushed me away. Why are you playing the victim now?" "Sarah, do you even have a heart?" His phone rang again. This time he didn't even look at me. He turned and ran. "Mia, I'm almost there." That familiar, intimate nickname jabbed lightly into my heart. But it didn't hurt anymore. After my thesis defense, I packed my bags and decided to move to the north. While waiting at the airport, I opened the university forum and uploaded our photos one by one. From 17 to 22. From high school uniforms to graduation gowns. The title was just one sentence. About Carter and me. Then, I sent the security footage of Carter locking me in the classroom, along with evidence of him enabling the cyberbullying, straight to the academic dean. I received a Snapchat message from Carter. "Where are you?" "I'm outside your apartment." I turned off my phone and boarded the plane. The flight from the southern heat into the high, sharp wind of Minneapolis took 4 hours. When the wheels struck the runway, the cabin shuddered, the overhead bins rattling with a clean, violent vibration that shook the stale air right out of my lungs. I switched off airplane mode while the plane taxied toward the gate. My phone immediately locked up. Notifications flooded the screen in a continuous, deafening vibration that went on for 90 seconds straight. Over 300 missed calls, hundreds of text messages, Instagram pings, Snapchat, alerts, and emails from addresses I hadn't seen since high school. I didn't open the direct messages. I opened the university forum. The thread I had posted from the departure lounge, simply titled About Carter and Me, sat pinned at the very top of the board. Below it, the red flame icon signaled that it had crossed 10,000 views and 600 comments within 3 hours. I had not written an essay. I had not begged for sympathy, nor had I cursed Mia Hayes or dissected Carter Evans's cowardice. I had simply uploaded 72 time-stamped photographs in chronological order, spanning 5 years, 3 months, and 12 days. The first was a picture of Carter at 17, sitting on the rusted radiator in my mother's kitchen, his collar crooked, eating peach pie off a chipped ceramic plate while my mother laughed just out of frame. The second was a scan of a receipt from a hardware and jewelry supply stall in downtown Austin. 2 sterling silver bands, dated the afternoon after our SATs, with his signature scrawled at the bottom. There were photos of Carter sleeping on my dorm rug during finals week, his arm wrapped around my ankle so I wouldn't leave the desk without waking him. Screenshots of his texts from freshman year asking me to bring him his asthma inhaler because he didn't want his fraternity brothers to know he had chronic bronchitis. Photographs of the handwritten study guides I had compiled for his organic chemistry midterms, complete with his margin notes in blue ballpoint. "If I pass this, I'm taking you to
Maine."
And at the very end, placed side by side without a single word of commentary, were 2 images. The first was the anonymous forum thread Mia had posted 48 hours earlier, calling me a delusional stalker and a 5-year side chick who forced herself on a guy. The second was a high-resolution screenshot of the back-end IP trace, showing the post had been submitted from the exact IP address assigned to Mia Hayes's private campus housing router, a connection registered under Carter Evans's co-signer agreement. Below the thread, the comment section had torn itself apart. Biochem_senior_24 Holy shit. She didn't stalk him. He lived in her mother's
House.
Stacy_K. Look at the dates on those pictures. He was taking her to family holidays while letting everyone in the frat call her his clingy neighbor.
What?
Kind of monster does that? Zach and Wait, Carter literally told us in sophomore year that she was just a girl from down the street who wouldn't take the hint. We gave her shit for 3 years straight because of that. Anonymous. Mia Hayes has been wearing Sera's actual promise ring around campus and pretending it was an heirloom Carter's grandfather gave him. I'm physically
Sick.
I scrolled past them without feeling a single tremor in my chest.
No.
Satisfaction, no bitter triumph. It felt like looking at autopsy reports for people who had drowned a long time ago. A text message from the Dean of Student Affairs sat in my inbox, timestamped 30 minutes prior. Ms. Miller, we have received your submission regarding the incident at the Fine Arts Auditorium on Thursday evening, accompanied by the building security footage. A formal inquiry into Mr. Evans and Ms. Hayes has been initiated. Immediately. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience. I closed the app, took the SIM card out of my phone, snapped the small piece of plastic between my thumb and forefinger and tossed it into the trash can at the end of the jet bridge. The air outside the terminal was 42 degrees, gray, and smelled of pine, needles, and industrial jet fuel. For the first time in 5 years, I could draw a breath down into the very bottom of my lungs without it catching on glass. Carter Evans stood on the 3rd floor landing of the apartment complex off University Boulevard, his knuckles raw from hammering on the wooden door of Unit 304.
Sera.
Open the door. Stop this. The hallway was dead silent. The faint smell of burnt toast drifted from 302, and down the hall, someone's television was blaring a late afternoon baseball
Game.
Carter shoved his hands into the pockets of his denim jacket, pacing the narrow runner rug. His phone buzzed in his palm every 30 seconds, calls from his department advisor, texts from his fraternity group chat that had suddenly turned venomous, notifications from the university board that was currently dissecting his private life across 500 active threads. He hadn't read the forum. He refused to look at it. Zach had tried to show him the screenshots outside the dining hall an hour ago, and Carter had shoved his friend against the brick wall, snarling at him to shut his mouth. She's just doing this to get a reaction, Carter had told himself as he drove 90 miles an hour through campus red lights. She's throwing a fit because I gave Mia the hosting slot. She wants me to chase her. She always wants me to chase her. He pulled out the duplicate brass key he had kept on his ring for 3 years, the one Sera's mother had given him when they first moved into the off-campus district. He jammed it into the lock and twisted. It clicked. Sera, look, I'm here, all right? He said loudly, shoving the door open with his shoulder. I told you we'd go down to your mom's this weekend. I cleared my
Schedule with the lab.
I'm doing what you wanted, so drop the... His voice died in the doorway. The apartment was not just empty. It had been stripped to the bone. The white linen curtains Sera had sewn by hand were gone from the windows, leaving the bare metal rods gleaming dully in the afternoon light. The bookshelf, where she kept her neat rows of molecular biology texts and dog-eared poetry collections, was completely bare. On the kitchen counter, where a ceramic jar of fresh lavender usually sat, there was only a clean circle of dust. In the center of the kitchen table sat a single, small cardboard box. Carter walked toward it slowly, his boots thudding against the cheap linoleum
Floor.
His throat felt suddenly constricted, as though someone had looped a rough twine around his trachea and pulled it taut. Inside the box lay 3 items. First, the silver promise ring, slightly bent from the afternoon she had thrown it across the parking lot, its band tarnished gray. Second, the shattered pieces of the silver bracelet his mother-in-law-to-be had given him, still carrying the dried flecks of gravel from when he had hurled it at Sera's chest in the hospital rain. Third, a small, folded manila folder containing the original notarized deed transfer for the used Honda Civic his father had sold to her mother 4 years ago, signed over completely to his name. Underneath the items was no note, no parting insult, no tears smeared on notebook paper, only a printed receipt for the termination of the lease, paid 6 months in advance, and a postmarked one-way transit voucher with the destination clipped
Off.
Carter reached into the box. When his fingers touched the broken links of the silver bracelet, a sharp piece of silver dug into the flesh of his index finger. A single drop of blood welled up, bright and red, dripping onto the clean manila paper. He stared at it, his chest rising and falling in shallow, erratic hitches. She went home, he muttered to the empty room, his voice thin and hoarse.
She
Went back to Oak Ridge. She's at her mom's. He pulled out his phone, his thumb shaking as he dialed her mother's number. The number you have dialed has been disconnected or is no longer in service. He dialed it again. The same automated female voice replied, flat and indifferent. Damn it, Helen, pick up. Carter cursed under his breath, his eyes stinging with sudden, hot frustration. Tell your daughter to stop acting like a child. He grabbed his keys off the counter, slammed the door of the empty apartment behind him, and ran down the stairs 2 at a time. Oak Ridge was a 3-hour drive south through flat, yellowing pastureland. The entire way down Interstate 35, Carter kept the speedometer pinned at 85. The sky turned from bruised gray to the deep, suffocating black of a country night. Rain began to fall again, heavy, thick sheets that slammed against his windshield like gravel, overwhelming the rhythmic slap of the wipers. He remembered the layout of the Miller house with an intimacy that felt burned into his bones. He knew the loose floorboard in the front hallway that creaked if he stepped on the left side. He knew that Helen Miller kept the spare house key under the terracotta pot shaped like a sleeping cat on the back porch. He knew that whenever Sera was hurt or overwhelmed, she would sit on the low brick wall behind the vegetable patch, pulling mint leaves apart between her fingers until her hands smelled sweet and sharp. I'll just explain it to Helen, he thought, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles went white against the black leather. Helen knows how Sera gets. Helen will tell her she's being unreasonable. We'll have breakfast, and I'll take Sera back to campus on Sunday night before the dean's office opens. It was past 9 when he turned down the narrow gravel lane lined with overgrown post oaks. He pulled up to the curb, killed the engine, and stepped out into the rain. The Miller house was dark. Not the darkness of people who were sleeping, but the hollow, dead darkness of an abandoned vessel. The front lawn was knee-high with weeds and wild dandelion
stalks.
The wooden swing that had hung from the old elm tree was gone, leaving 2 severed ropes dangling in the wet wind. On the front porch, the wicker chairs were gone, and the windows were boarded from the inside with raw plywood. A rusted for sale/foreclosure sign was hammered into the mud near the mailbox, the paper weathered to gray pulp. Carter stood in the driveway, the rain soaking through his denim jacket within seconds, sticking the fabric to his skin like cold lead. What is this? He whispered. A pair of headlights swept across the wet grass as an old Ford pickup slowed down on the road behind him. The truck idled, its engine rumbling in the quiet night, before a man in a heavy oilskin coat stepped out, holding a flashlight. It was Mr. Henderson, the retired mechanic who lived across the lane. Who's that out there? The old man called out, shining the beam directly into Carter's face. The property's private. Bank owns it now. Carter raised a hand to block the glare, squinting through the rain. Mr. Henderson? It's me. It's Carter. Carter Evans. The old man lowered the flashlight slightly, his brow furrowing beneath the brim of his soaked hat. He didn't lower his guard. Evans. Henderson spat into the grass. What the hell are you doing here, boy? Where's Mrs. Miller? Carter took a step forward, his voice cracking with a frantic edge he couldn't hide. Where's Sera? Did they move into town?
Did
Helen buy a place near the clinic? Henderson stared at him for 3 long, terrifying seconds. The look on the old man's face wasn't anger, it was a deep, curdled disgust. You really don't know? Henderson asked, his voice low and raspy over the sound of the downpour. Know what? Tell me where they are. Helen's been dead 2 years, Carter. The rain seemed to stop making sound. The world shrank to the size of a pinhead, the air turning so thick and cold Carter felt his knees buckle. What? What are you talking about? Carter let out a jagged, defensive laugh that sounded like dry leaves scraping on concrete. That's not funny, Mr. Henderson. I just spoke to Sera told me we were coming down for her birthday this weekend. I was going to. Helen had a massive cerebral hemorrhage 24 months ago, Henderson said, his words falling like iron weights into the mud. Died right there on the linoleum in the kitchen. Sera was up at that fancy university of yours. She called an ambulance from 300 miles away, screaming into the phone at the 911 dispatch. Henderson took a step closer, the flashlight beam illuminating the rain, streaming down his weathered cheeks. The girl drove down here in the middle of the night alone. No one with her.
She
Stayed in this empty house for 3 days by herself, making the arrangements, while the bank foreclosed on the medical debt. I asked her where that boy was, the one Helen fed every Sunday for 7 years. The one who promised to look out for her. Henderson paused, his eyes narrowing into cold slits. She told me you were busy with your exams. She said you were doing something important and she didn't want to bother you. 50 missed calls. The memory hit Carter with the force of an oncoming freight train. 2 years ago, the night of the Exchange Fellowship vote. The hotel room in Austin where he had taken Mia for the celebration dinner.
The
faint glow of his phone on the nightstand, vibrating against the wood again and again until the battery nearly died. Mia picking up the receiver with that soft, sweet, sleepy voice. Who is it? His own voice, irritated, thick with wine and ego. It's Sera. Just hang up. The silver bracelet slamming against her collarbone in the hospital rain. 48 hours ago, her parents passed away when she was a kid. She has to work multiple jobs. You at least still have your mom. And you have me. Carter fell to his knees in the mud. The gravel tore through his jeans, biting into his skin, but he didn't feel it. He couldn't breathe. A sound tore out of his throat, a wet, animalistic gasp as he gripped his hair with both hands, his face pressed against the sodden earth of the driveway where Helen Miller used to wave to them from the kitchen window. Where is she? Carter choked out, the mud filling his mouth. Where is Helen? Henderson didn't look at him with pity. He pointed the flashlight toward the small, wooded rise 2 miles down the road, where the steeple of the Baptist church rose against the black sky. Plot 44, the old man said coldly. Behind the cedar trees. Not that you have any right to stand there. The church cemetery was unlit, save for the pale reflection of the distant highway lights bouncing off the low-hanging clouds. Carter stumbled through the wet grass, his boots sinking into the soft earth, tripping over headstones that had stood for a century. His hands were covered in black dirt, his jacket was soaked through to the lining. He found it under the sweeping branch of a dead cedar tree. A simple, low-set granite marker. Helen Marie Miller. March 14, 1968 to October 28, 2022. Beloved mother. Rest in the light. Resting on top of the granite base was a small, dry arrangement of artificial white carnations, the kind that didn't rot in the winter rain.
tucked beneath the
plastic stem was a small, laminated card written in Sera's neat, upright handwriting.
Mom.
I finished the degree. I didn't let them take it from me. I'm going where it snows. You don't have to worry about me anymore. I'm completely free. Carter collapsed onto the gravestone, wrapping his arms around the cold granite block as if he could pull warmth out of the rock. The sheer, staggering weight of what he had done crashed down upon his shoulders, like a mountain of lead. He had thought she was throwing tantrums. He had thought she was jealous of
Mia fragility.
He had thought her silence over the last 2 years was a strategic weapon, an elaborate performance designed to make him feel guilty so that she could win the upper hand in their quiet war of attrition. She hadn't been playing a game. She had been surviving a catastrophe. She had stood in that hospital emergency room with an 4 needle torn out of her hand, watching him drape his jacket over Mia's shoulders, knowing that the boy who had once promised to protect her was the very person who had left her to bury her mother in the dark alone. Sera, he sobbed into the stone, his tears mixing with the muddy rain that ran down the carved letters of Helen's name. Sera, please, please, God, Sera? The cemetery offered no answer. Only the wind shaking the cedar needles and the steady, indifferent rhythm of the rain against the grass. When Carter returned to the university campus on Monday morning, the world he had spent 5 years constructing had completely evaporated. He hadn't slept in 48 hours. His eyes were bloodshot and sunken. His clothes were rumpled and stained with dried mud from the Oak Ridge churchyard. As he walked down the main corridor of the Chemistry and Life Sciences building, the silence that followed him was absolute. Students standing by the lockers stopped talking the moment his shadow crossed the linoleum. Friends he had known since his freshman year looked him dead in the eyes and stepped into adjacent classrooms to avoid brushing his shoulder. Outside the department head's office, Mia Hayes was waiting. She was wearing a pale pink sweater, her hair carefully curled, clutching her leather notebook to her chest. But the practiced innocence on her face had fractured into a frantic, sharp-edged panic. The moment she saw Carter, she lunged forward, grabbing his sleeve. Carter, Where have you been? Why weren't you answering your phone? Her voice was high, trembling with real fear. The dean's office called me in at 8 this morning. They have the hallway security tapes from the gala. They're saying, what you did constitutes false imprisonment under the Student Code of Conduct. They're talking about revoking my hosting credit and putting a disciplinary suspension on my transcript. Carter looked down at her hand on his arm. It was small, delicate, manicured. The hand that had worn Sera's promise ring for 2 years while pretending to be a wounded sparrow. Carter, look at me, Mia cried, shaking his arm. You have to go in there and tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them Sera agreed to swap slots with me at the last minute because she was feeling ill. Tell them you didn't lock the door. Tell them the latch was broken. You're the top graduate fellow. They won't expel you. If you take the blame as an administrative error, they'll drop the investigation against me. Carter stared at her face. For 5 years, he had convinced himself that Mia was the one who needed saving, that she was soft, that she had no one, that she was the fragile creature deserving of his chivalry. Now, looking into her wide, calculating eyes, he saw nothing but an endless, shallow mirror of his own grotesque vanity. Did you know? Carter asked. His voice was completely flat, dry as ash. Mia blinked, startled.
What?
Know what? 2 years ago, when you answered my phone in the Austin hotel room. A microsecond of hesitation flickered across Mia's features before she forced her eyes to fill with tears.
Carter, what are you talking about?
That was 2 years ago. I told you. I thought it was just her being clingy. Her mother had just died on the kitchen floor. Carter said, each syllable dropping like a hammer. Mia took half a step back, her lower lip trembling, but her instinct for self-preservation immediately took over. How was I supposed to know that?
She
didn't say it. She was always so dramatic, Carter. You said so yourself.
You're
the one who told me to hang up. You can't blame me for that now just because she posted those stupid pictures on the forum. Carter looked at her for a long time. He felt no rage. He felt only an immense, hollow sickness that made his stomach turn. Take your hand off me, he said quietly. Carter. Take your hand off me, Mia. She snatched her hand back as if burned, her face twisting into an ugly, sneering mask. You think you're better than me? You're the one who hid her for 5 years because you like having everyone think you were single. You're the one who gave me her lab notes and her ring. You built this, Carter. If I go down, I'm telling the committee everything. The office door swung open. The Dean of Student Affairs, flanked by the chair of the chemistry department, stood in the doorway. Their expressions were carved from cold stone. Mr. Evans. Ms. Hayes. Inside.
now.
The disciplinary proceedings lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was incontrovertible. The time-stamped security footage showed Carter dragging Sera into the classroom, turning the master lock key and pocketing it before walking out to greet the gala committee. Furthermore, an IT audit of the department servers confirmed that Mia Hayes had systematically accessed Sarah Miller's archived research logs and submitted several of Sera's primary data sets under her own name for the upcoming fall fellowship application, with Carter Evans listed as the approving graduate reviewer. The consequences were swift, clinical, and total. Mia Hayes was stripped of her departmental honors, her exchange fellowship was retroactively revoked, and she was suspended for 2 academic semesters for severe academic dishonesty and targeted harassment. The grad schools she had applied to received formal letters of disciplinary notification from the dean's office. Within 48 hours, her admission offers were quietly rescinded. Carter Evans was stripped of his graduate research stipend and his co-authorship on the department's flagship publication. Because the locking of the door involved physical restraint, the university placed a permanent notation of disciplinary misconduct on his official transcript, a black mark that effectively terminated his prospects of entering any top-tier doctoral program or corporate research lab in the country. On the day he packed his desk in the laboratory, his fraternity brothers did not show up to help him. Zach walked past the lab door, looked at Carter through the glass, and kept walking without breaking stride. Carter carried his single box of personal belongings out to the parking lot. Under a gray, drizzling sky, he sat in the driver's seat of his car for 3 hours, staring at the empty passenger seat where a girl used to sit with a thermos of tea, waiting for him to finish his shift. 18 months later, Duluth, Minnesota. The winter had arrived early, coating the rocky shores of Lake Superior in thick, translucent shelves of blue ice. The wind off the water was sharp enough to slice through wool, carrying the clean, wild scent of frozen freshwater and northern spruce. At 7:30 in the morning, the lights inside the Lake Superior Biogeochemical Research Institute were already blazing. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the third-floor lab, stamping the snow off my insulated boots. "Morning, Miller," Dr. Eris Thorne called out from the mass spectrometer station. He was a silver-haired geochemist with a dry wit and a total intolerance for academic posturing. The sediment core samples from Isle Royale came in at 6. The lipid biomarker profiles look incredible. Take a look before you run the chromatography. On it, I said, unzipping my parka and hanging it on the hook by the door. Underneath, I was wearing an oversized gray wool sweater and dark jeans. My hair, once kept long and straightened because Carter had casually mentioned he liked it that way, was now cut into a sharp, chin-length bob that stayed out of my eyes when I leaned over a microscope. I pulled on my white lab coat, snapped my latex gloves into place, and walked over to the terminal. For the past year and a half, my life had been measured not in emotional crises, but in atmospheric pressures, carbon isotopes, and the steady, honest hum of laboratory centrifuges. When I arrived in Minnesota with 2 suitcases and $1,800 to my name, I had taken a night shift technician job at a water testing facility while applying for research assistantships.
Dr. Thorne had looked at my
undergraduate portfolio, looked at the gap year in Europe, and asked me a single question during my interview. "Can you keep a clean logbook, or do you let other people do your thinking for you?" "I write my own data," I had replied. He hired me 20 minutes later. Here, nobody knew who Carter Evans was. Nobody knew about the anonymous forum threads, the 5 years of waiting in dorm room shadows, or the girl who had cried in the rain outside an emergency room. To the people in this building, I was Sarah Miller, the analyst who never fabricated a baseline, who could calibrate an HPLC machine in the dark, and whose research on boreal freshwater methane cycles had just been accepted for presentation at the National Environmental Science Conference in Chicago. At noon, I took my sandwich down to the glass atrium, overlooking the frozen harbor. My phone chimed on the table. A message from my landlord. "Hi, Sarah. Package arrived at the front desk for you from the Municipal Archive
in Austin.
Looks like the official estate deed papers for your mom's property." I took a slow sip of hot black coffee. 6 months ago, with a stipend from my research fellowship and a small bank loan, I had officially bought back the deed to my mother's small house in Oak Ridge from the Municipal Holding Trust. I didn't plan on living there. The memories were too sharp, too tangled in weeds, but I had hired a local landscaping crew to clear the wild grass, plant a perimeter of sweet clover, and paint the porch railings clean white. It wasn't an act of nostalgia. It was a debt paid to the woman who had spent 7 years baking pies for a boy who couldn't even say her daughter's name in
public.
I closed my laptop, packed my notes, and walked back to the clean, cold hum of
The lab.
the North American Limnology and Geochemistry Summit was held at the Palmer House in downtown Chicago during the first week of December. The conference hall was packed with over 2,000 researchers, industry representatives, and graduate fellows from across the continent. Crystal chandeliers hung high above rows of poster displays, while the scent of hotel coffee and dry erase markers filled the carpeted corridors. On the second afternoon, I stood in front of poster board number 142, quantifying boreal lake sediment methanogenesis via high-resolution lipid fractionation, explaining our calibration models to a small cluster of postdocs from Michigan. "The key is maintaining the anaerobic boundary during extraction," I explained, pointing to the secondary chromatogram graph on the board. "If your sample oxidizes for even 3 minutes during the centrifuge cycle, your isotopic signature drifts by nearly 4%. "Brilliant approach, Miller," a researcher from Madison noted, jotting down the reference. "Are you publishing the full protocol in Nature Geoscience next spring?" "We submit the final manuscript next month," I smiled. The group dispersed with handshakes and exchanged cards. I turned around to grab a bottle of water from the small side table. A man was standing 10 feet away, motionless in the crowded aisle. He was wearing an ill-fitting dark suit that looked several years old, the sleeves slightly frayed at the cuffs. His frame was thin, almost gaunt, his shoulder blades protruding against the fabric of his jacket. His face, once defined by the sharp, arrogant jawline that had commanded every room on campus, was pale and drawn, with heavy, dark hollows carved beneath his eyes. It was Carter. He looked at me with an expression that was terrifying in its intensity, a mixture of desperate disbelief raw terror, and a wild, trembling hunger, as though he had been wandering through an Arctic wasteland for 2 years and had suddenly stumbled upon a fire. Sera, he breathed. The sound of his voice carried the same cadence, the same familiar timbre, but it hit my ears with the absolute neutrality of a stranger asking for directions. On a subway platform, my heart didn't leap into my throat. My hands didn't shake. The cold, leaden ball of dread that used to sit behind my ribs whenever he walked into a room simply failed to materialize. I set my water bottle down on the table, smoothed the lapel of my blazer, and looked at him. "Hello, Carter." His lips parted, his chest hitching as if he had forgotten how to draw breath. He took 2 stumbling steps forward, stopping just short of the blue divider line separating my poster stall from the walkway. I saw your name in the conference program," he stammered, his fingers twitching against the seams of his trousers. "Miller S. Boreal sediment. Analysis. I didn't know if it was really you. You cut your hair." "I did. It looks good. It suits you." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. His eyes darted frantically across my face, searching for a trace of anger, a flicker of pain, anything he could recognize. I work for a commercial soil testing contractor in Joliet now. Quality control. Just basic data entry, mostly. I drove up for the afternoon sessions." "I see. I hope the sessions are useful for your company." My voice was polite, professional, and completely devoid of inflection. Carter flinched as if I had struck him across the face with an iron bar. "Sera, please," he whispered, stepping closer. His voice broke completely, the polished veneer he had worn for 5 years cracking into jagged, pathetic shards. "Don't talk to me like that. Don't talk to me like I'm some vendor from another booth." "How should I talk to you?" I asked calmly. "I went to Oak Ridge," he choked out, his eyes suddenly filling with thick, hot tears that spilled over his pale cheeks without shame. "I went there the night you left. I went to the house. I saw Henderson. I went to the churchyard, Sera. I stood at your mother's grave in the rain. I watched him." A younger version of me would have felt a savage, burning vindication at seeing him broken in the mud. An even younger version would have rushed forward to wrap her arms around his neck, desperate to soothe his grief. Now, looking at him, I felt only a quiet, clinical detachment. "You shouldn't have gone there," I said softly. "That was private. I didn't know." Carter cried, his voice rising in volume, causing several passing attendees to glance over in surprise. He didn't care. He dropped his head, clutching his temples with both hands, his body trembling violently. "Sera, I swear to God on my life, I didn't know she was gone. If I had known, if I had looked at my phone that night in Austin, I would have driven across the state. I would have carried you. I didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't care to know, Carter." My words were neither loud nor angry. They were simply facts, laid out with the precision of a chemical formula. "You didn't answer that phone because ignoring me made you feel powerful. You gave Mia my research and my mother's jewelry because diminishing me made you feel generous. You didn't lock me in that classroom to protect Mia's dream. You locked me in there because my presence was a reminder of who you actually were, when nobody was watching." Carter fell to his knees right there, on the thin convention carpet of the Palmer House. People stopped. Whispers broke out among the researchers nearby. A conference. Security guard turned his head from 40 feet away, beginning to walk toward us. Carter didn't see any of them. He reached out with trembling, desperate hands, trying to touch the hem of my trousers, his knuckles hovering an inch above the floor, afraid to cross the invisible line. "I have nothing left, Sera," he sobbed, his forehead nearly touching the carpet. "They took the fellowship. The lab kicked me out. My parents won't look at me without bringing up the disciplinary letter. Nobody will hire me for real research. Every time I close my eyes, I hear your voice asking me if it was too much to ask for you to acknowledge me. Every single night for 18 months. He looked up, his face ruined with tears, snot, and the sheer, agonizing humiliation of a man who had burned his own kingdom to ash. "Give me something," he begged, his voice a ragged, scraping whisper. "Tell me you hate me. Tell me I'm a piece of shit. Scream at me. Hit me. Do something.
Sera.
Please. Just don't look at me like you don't even remember who I am." I looked down at the boy I had loved from 17 to 22. I remembered the boy who had covered my eyes in the high school clinic. I remembered the boy who had built a silver ring with raw knuckles, and the man who had thrown that same ring into the dirt when it became inconvenient.
All of those boys were dead.
The man kneeling on the carpet in front of me was not my past. He was simply a stranger suffering the exact mathematical consequences of his own choices. I don't hate you, Carter, I said. A tiny, pathetic spark of hope flared in his bloodshot eyes.
Sir?
Hatred requires an investment of energy, I continued, my voice steady, clear, and utterly still. It requires me to carry your name into my tomorrow.
And you?
Simply don't belong in my life anymore. Not as an enemy, not as a memory, and certainly not as a regret. I took half a step back, stepping out of the reach of a shadow. My colleague is waiting for me in the main auditorium. Please stand up. You are causing an unnecessary scene. The conference security guard arrived, placing a firm, heavy hand on Carter's shoulder. Sir, is there a problem here? Are you a registered attendee? Carter didn't fight the guard. He didn't answer. He stayed on the floor, staring up at me as I picked up my leather binder, zipped my laptop bag, and turned toward the wide, bright corridor leading to the main stage. I didn't walk fast. I didn't look back to see if he was watching. The double doors of the auditorium swung open with a clean, muffled click. Inside, the lights were warm. The air was humming with the sound of 800 scientists discussing the future of the world, and on the podium screen, at the front of the hall, my name was displayed in crisp, clean, white letters. Dr. Eris Thorne and Sarah Miller, Institute of Northern Geochemistry. I walked down the center aisle, took my seat in the front row, opened my notebook to a fresh, unwritten page, and began to write.